Welcome, weary travelers, to the Whispering Vale, where a single tap of a pebble, tap, 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 unlocks a world of tranquility. What if a fairy witch's whispers could unravel the chaos within you, just as they did for Mira? Stay with us to find out. If Eloria's mystical sounds tingle your soul, give this a gentle like, and subscribe to join her quiet journey. Let's weave peace together, ring the bell, and let the magic begin. First story: Unraveling the Secrets of Fairy Witch ASMR. In a forest where the trees whispered secrets to the wind, there lived a being unlike any other, a fairy witch named Lysara. Her home was a hollowed-out oak, its bark shimmering with flecks of silver moss, and its roots cradling a tiny stream that sang soft lullabies. Lysara was no ordinary fairy, nor a typical witch. She wove spells not with grand gestures or booming chants, but with the gentlest of sounds, taps, rustles, and whispers, that carried magic deep into the hearts of those who listened. The villagers at the forest's edge spoke of her in hushed tones. Some called her a healer, others a trickster, but all agreed on one thing: her voice could unravel the tightest knots of worry. They didn't know how she did it, only that those who wandered too close to her oak often returned with dreamy smiles, speaking of tingling sensations that danced along their spines. One evening, as the moon hung low and golden, a young woman named Elara stumbled into the forest. Her shoulders sagged with the weight of sleepless nights, her eyes dulled by endless thoughts that refused to quiet. She'd heard the tales of the fairy witch and, desperate for peace, followed the sound of trickling water until she reached the silver-mossed oak. A soft rustling greeted her, like leaves brushing against one another in a tender breeze. Then came a voice, light as a feather yet rich with warmth. "Come closer, dear one," it said, each word a delicate tap against the air. Elara hesitated, but the sound was so inviting, so calming, that her feet moved forward on their own. Lysara emerged from the shadows, her wings shimmering like dew-kissed spiderwebs, her eyes glinting with an ancient knowing. She wore a cloak of woven vines, and her fingers danced lightly over a small wooden bowl filled with smooth river stones. "You're restless," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to brush against Elara's ears. "Let me help you unravel that storm inside." Elara sat on a cushion of moss as Lysara began her work. The fairy witch picked up a stone, tapping it gently against another, tap, 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 a rhythm so steady it felt like the heartbeat of the forest itself. Then she rustled a handful of dried petals, their crisp edges scraping softly against her palms. Each sound layered over the last, building a tapestry of quiet magic. Elara's eyelids grew heavy, her breath slowing as the tingling began, a gentle wave that started at the crown of her head and flowed downward, melting the tension in her shoulders. "Listen," Lysara whispered, her voice now a thread of silk weaving through the air. "The secret isn't in the sounds alone. It's in what they awaken within you." She brushed a feather across Elara's cheek, the touch so light it was almost imagined, and yet it sent a shiver of calm through her entire being. "The forest speaks, and I borrow its voice. But you, dear one, hold the power to hear it." As Lysara spoke, she poured water from a tiny vial into the stream, the drip, drip, drip blending with the rustle of leaves overhead. She traced patterns in the air with her fingers, as if stirring the night itself, and Elara felt her mind soften, her worries dissolving like mist in the morning sun. The fairy witch's magic wasn't just in the sounds, it was in the way they unlocked something hidden, a quiet place within Elara she'd forgotten existed. Hours passed, or perhaps only moments, time seemed to bend in Lysara's presence. When Elara finally opened her eyes, the forest was bathed in dawn's soft glow. Lysara smiled, her wings fluttering faintly. "Take this with you," she said, pressing a small stone into Elara's hand. "Tap it when you need me. The secret is yours now." Elara returned to the village, her steps light, her heart steady. She didn't speak of Lysara's oak or the sounds that had soothed her soul. But at night, when the world grew loud again, she'd sit by her window, tapping the stone, tap, 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 and feel the fairy witch's whispers weave through her once more, unraveling the chaos and leaving only peace. And so, the legend of the fairy witch grew, a quiet mystery carried on the wind, her secrets shared only with those brave enough to listen. Second story: Fairy Witch ASMR, Whispers of Magic and Mystery. Deep within the twilight glade, where the stars peeked through a canopy of silver leaves, there lived a fairy witch named Seraphine. She was a creature of shadow and light, her wings delicate as moonlit mist, her hair a cascade of midnight threaded with glints of stardust. Unlike the witches of old who chanted over roaring fires, Seraphine's magic flowed through whispers, soft, fleeting sounds that wove spells of peace and wonder into the air. The glade was her sanctuary, a place where the wind hummed through hollow reeds and the brook murmured secrets to the stones. The creatures of the forest knew her well, the owls perched silently to hear her tales, the foxes curled up as her voice brushed their fur like a breeze. Yet, to the humans beyond the trees, she was a mystery, a rumor carried on the lips of those who'd felt her presence but never seen her face. One stormy night, a traveler named Kale wandered into the glade. His cloak was soaked, his spirit heavy with the weight of a journey that had no end in sight. He'd heard whispers of the fairy witch, tales of a voice that could hush even the wildest tempest. Drawn by a faint tinkling, like glass chimes kissed by the wind, he stumbled upon a clearing where Seraphine sat, perched atop a crescent-shaped rock. Her eyes met his, glowing faintly like embers in the dusk. "You're lost," she said, her voice a whisper so soft it seemed to curl around his ears, warm and intimate. Kale froze, captivated by the sound. It wasn't just her words, it was the way they danced, accompanied by the gentle tap of her fingers against a crystal vial, the rustle of her wings as they fluttered ever so slightly. "Sit," she murmured, patting the moss beside her. Kale obeyed, sinking into the earth as Seraphine began her craft. She plucked a feather from her wing, brushing it lightly across a smooth stone, swish, swish, the sound so tender it felt like a caress against his mind. Then she leaned closer, her breath a faint sigh as she whispered, "The storm outside is nothing to the one within. Let me quiet it." She reached into a pouch at her side, pulling out a handful of dried lavender. Her fingers rubbed the petals together, crinkle, crinkle, releasing a scent that mingled with the damp air. Each sound she made was deliberate, a thread in an invisible tapestry of calm. Kale's shoulders loosened, his breaths deepening as a tingling sensation bloomed at the base of his skull, trickling down his spine like warm honey. "Do you hear it?" Seraphine asked, her voice now a melodic hum, low and resonant. She tapped a twig against the rock, tick, 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 and the rhythm seemed to sync with the pulse of the glade itself. "The magic isn't mine alone. It's in the whispers of the world, the leaves, the water, the night. I only borrow them to weave something new." Kale closed his eyes, letting her words wash over him. She poured water from the vial into a shallow dish, the drip, drip, drip blending with the distant patter of rain. Her fingers traced circles in the air, as if stirring the sounds together, and Kale felt the chaos in his chest unravel. Memories of his endless road faded, replaced by a stillness he hadn't known he craved. "You carry mysteries too," Seraphine whispered, her voice so close now it felt like it lived inside him. "Listen to them. They'll guide you home." She pressed the feather into his hand, its softness a promise of the peace she'd given him. "Keep this. When you need me, let it brush the air." When Kale opened his eyes, the storm had passed, and Seraphine was gone, vanished into the mist like a dream. The glade was silent, save for the faint hum of the brook. He stood, lighter than he'd been in years, and as he left the forest, he clutched the feather tight. Back in the world beyond, Kale never spoke of the fairy witch, but on quiet nights, he'd sit by his fire, brushing the feather against his palm, swish, swish, and hear her whispers again, a magic and mystery that lingered long after the glade faded from sight. And in the twilight glade, Seraphine smiled, knowing her secrets had found another soul to cradle. Third story: The Mystical Sounds of Fairy Witch ASMR, a Journey into Tranquility. In the heart of the Whispering Vale, where the air shimmered with unseen magic and the trees bowed as if in reverence, there dwelled a fairy witch named Eloria. She was a vision of grace and mystery, her wings delicate as frost on a spider's web, her eyes deep pools of twilight. Unlike the witches who wielded fire or the fairies who danced in sunlight, Eloria's power lay in sound, soft, mystical tones that rippled through the veil like waves of tranquility. Her home was a nook within an ancient willow, its cascading branches forming a curtain of green around a crystal pool that glowed faintly under the moon. The creatures of the vale adored her, the deer paused to listen, the crickets hushed their song when she began hers. To the villagers beyond the woods, she was a legend, a voice on the wind that promised rest to the weary, though few dared seek her out. One twilight, a young potter named Mira ventured into the vale. Her hands were calloused from clay, her mind tangled with the noise of a life too busy to pause. She'd heard tales of the fairy witch, whispers of a sound so pure it could mend a fractured spirit. Guided by the faint chime of bells, soft and distant, like stars singing, Mira found herself at the edge of Eloria's willow. A rustle parted the branches, and Eloria appeared, her wings catching the last light of day. "You're tired," she said, her voice a whisper that seemed to stroke Myra's ears, gentle and warm. The sound alone eased the ache in Myra's chest, and she nodded, unable to speak. Eloria smiled, a knowing curve of her lips, and beckoned her closer. "Come. Let the sounds guide you." Mira sank onto a bed of moss by the pool as Eloria began her ritual. The fairy witch lifted a small shell, tapping it against a smooth pebble, tap, 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 a rhythm so steady it felt like the pulse of the earth. Then she ran her fingers through the willow fronds, swish, swish, their soft brushing blending with the hum of the evening breeze. Myra's breath slowed, a tingling warmth spreading from her scalp downward, as if the sounds were unraveling the knots within her. "Listen closely," Eloria whispered, her voice now a thread of silk weaving through the air. She dipped her hand into the pool, letting water trickle back, drip, 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 each drop a note in a melody of calm. "These are the vale's gifts. I shaped them, but they belong to all who hear." She picked up a tiny bell, giving it a gentle shake, tinkle, tinkle, and the sound danced around Mira, light and playful, lifting the weight from her shoulders. As Eloria worked, she brushed a feather across Myra's wrist, the touch so faint it was like a breath against her skin. The sensation deepened the tingling, a cascade of peace that flowed through Myra's entire being. "The mystery isn't in the magic," Eloria murmured, her words soft as a sigh. "It's in you, your stillness, waiting to be found." She rustled a handful of dried moss, crinkle, crinkle, and the earthy scent mingled with the sounds, grounding Mira in the moment. Time slipped away, lost in the symphony of Eloria's craft. When Mira opened her eyes, the moon hung high, bathing the vale in silver. Eloria pressed the pebble into her hand. "Keep this," she said, her voice fading like a distant echo. "Tap it when you need tranquility. The journey begins within." Mira left the vale, her steps light, her mind clear as the crystal pool. She returned to her potter's wheel, but now her hands moved with ease, her heart unburdened. On restless nights, she'd sit by her window, tapping the pebble, tap, 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 and feel the fairy witch's mystical sounds wrap around her once more, a journey into tranquility that never truly ended. In the whispering vale, Eloria continued her quiet work, her whispers drifting on the wind, a gift to those brave enough to listen, and to those who sought the magic of stillness in a world too loud. Feel the whispers of the whispering vale calling you. Step into your own journey of tranquility. Tap your pebble, your moment of peace, and let the mystical sounds guide you. Share your story with us below, or close your eyes and listen again. Subscribe to join Eloria's quiet magic, and let's weave stillness together. What sound soothes your soul? Tell us, dear traveler, and let the vale hear your whisper too.